Welcome to Grace Fellowship Baptist Church Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. We are in the book of 2 Kings and chapter 12. Verse 1. In the 7th year of Jehu, Joash became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years Jehoiada, the priest, instructed him. The high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings there. So we get the summary of Joash as king. As long as the high priest that raised him was alive, he was a righteous king, according to those who wrote this. They do not mention that after the high priest died, he started to do evil things. It took the Chronicles centuries later for them to come back and revisit it and rethink it and be a little more nuanced. They state the facts here. For approximately the first half of his reign, he was a righteous king. After that, he fell away from the Lord and lost the influence that he had that he respected. And Chronicles records his evil deeds. Kings does not. They do record, they record some of the facts. They don't record all of them. He, however, let the people continue to offer sacrifices and incense in places other than the temple in Jerusalem. That had been a practice that had become cultural. It was adopted from the surrounding peoples, and basically every high hill in a community got a little altar and everybody worshiped there. And during his reign, at least the beginning of it, he made sure that they were worshiping Yahweh at the little shrines and not some of these foreign gods. But he didn't insist that they had to come to Jerusalem to offer their sacrifices. And so people didn't travel far. They didn't come to worship at the temple at Jerusalem. They stayed local. And apparently they didn't come to Jerusalem for Passover, because we don't hear about that until later. We don't hear of anything like that. They weren't coming for the festivals. They were staying in their own communities. He was a fairly good leader, and God let him rule a long time. Let's say 40 years is a long time to be king. Of course, he started really young. He also died at an age that was considered old but not ancient. A fairly typical age to die. 45 was life expectancy. He died at 47. So, he was about average. He didn't, and we'll get to at the end of the chapter, we'll get to how he died, and it wasn't of old age. Verse 4. Joash said to the priest, "Collect all the money that is brought as sacred offerings to the temple of the Lord, the money collected in the census, the money received from personal vows, and the money brought voluntarily to the temple. Let every priest receive the money from one of the treasures, and let it be used to repair whatever damage is found in the temple." So he has a good mind. He wants the temple repaired, and he says, okay, y'all collect the money, and you, the priest, repair the temple. Sounds like a good plan, because only the priest or the Levites should enter the temple. The priest doing the work, they can receive the money, they be paid for it, they can do the work, it's going to be sacred work, And so the priest doing it makes sense. And that's the plan he had. Is the priest would receive the money, they would spend it on materials and do the repairs and get paid. He wanted their welfare. He wanted them to be able to be paid. He did not understand God's command well enough to require all the people to come to the temple to do all their sacrifices and all their offerings and all their worship, because if they had done that, the temple would have been well supported and people would have seen how decrepit it was getting and insisted upon it being rebuilt. And that's not what happened. He was there, next door to it, so to speak, and he's seeing it's in disrepair. He's spent some time and effort to repair the palace and repair the walls, and then there's this decrepit temple that looks like nobody cares about Yahweh. And he tells them to fix it. And they're collecting the money that comes into the temple, and they're not repairing it. Verse 6, but the 23rd year of King Joash, the priest still had not repaired the temple. Therefore King Joash summoned Jehoiada, the priest, and the other priests, and asked them, why aren't you repairing the damage done to the temple? Take no more money from your treasurers, but hand it over for repairing the temple. The priests agreed that they would not collect any more money from the people, and that they would not repair the temple themselves. So he waited 23 years. The text makes it sound like one of the first things he did as king is instruct the priest to repair the temple. It was several years later. He might have been 5 or 10 years into his reign. So, call it, 15 to 20 years later, after he gave them the command, they still haven't repaired the temple. Okay, it takes time. The priests have to learn how to do carpentry and stonework and whatever to weave the curtains or whatever needs to be repaired, and then collect the materials and do it. So, 2 or 3, 4, 5 years, that's reasonable. He's busy with the affairs of state, and he kind of looks up one day and goes, hey, I gave them command and they haven't done it. Let's call them together and find out what the progress is. Which means he's not checking with them routinely about this. He's running the country without going to the temple routinely, without talking to the priest routinely. He is doing his job and leaving them to do their job, and he is not worshiping Yahweh in the temple either. And when he'd been ruling 23 years, he's had enough, and he calls a meeting and says, hey, if you're not going to do it, quit collecting the money and let somebody else do it. Verse 9, Jehoiada the priest took a chest and bored a hole in its lid. He placed it beside the altar on the right side as one enters the temple of the Lord. The priest who guarded the entrance put into the chest all the money that was brought to the temple of the Lord. Whenever they saw that there was a large amount of money in the chest, the royal secretary and the high priest came, counted the money that had been brought into the temple of the Lord, and put it into bags. When the amount had been determined, they gave the money to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple. With it they paid those who worked on the temple of the Lord, the carpenters and the builders, the masons and the stonecutters. They purchased timber and dressed stone for the repair of the temple of the Lord, and met all the other expenses of restoring the temple. So, at the meeting, they came up with a different plan. They're going to hire outside contractors. And they did so. And anytime the chest started to get full, the high priest and the royal secretary, in other words, Joash's representative, would come in and count the money, bag it up, and then give it to the supervisors of the construction crew. And then the construction crew would then buy the materials they need and come in and do the work. And this worked. The repairs got done. That meant, however, non-priests were in the temple doing the work. Now, in building the temple to start with, non-priests had done the work to build the temple, but once it was dedicated, supposedly only those who were offering their offering and the priest and then the Levites, their assistants, were the only ones in the temple. You didn't just have people routinely coming into the temple. And there were parts of the temple that even only priests went into, or only the Levites at the instruction of the priest went into. And then there were parts that only the high priest went into. So, they had it segregated within, but the repairs apparently were on the outside. They didn't need to get deep into the building. But the workmen obviously had to go to where the work needed to be done. And so they bought materials and they repaired. Verse 13, the money brought into the temple was not spent for making silver basins, wick trimmers, sprinkling bowls, trumpets, or any of the other articles of gold or silver for the temple of the Lord. It was paid to the workers who used it to repair the temple. They did not require an accounting from those to whom they gave the money to pay the workers because they acted with complete honesty. The money from the guilt offerings and the sin offerings was not brought into the temple of the Lord. It belonged to the priest. So they had some sort of accountability, and they did not overburden the outside contractors with too much accounting. They saw that the foreman that received the money paid the workers and paid them honestly, and they bought materials, and as long as materials came in and workmen came in and did their work, and it was about like what the government expected that kind of worker to get paid, therefore the appearance was that there was honesty going on, and the workers weren't complaining they weren't getting paid, etc., etc. They didn't require of them to be audited, to show financial integrity. And in a society where a rumor very often picks up on the truth and there's no news, I'm sure the rumor mill would have caught if the workmen at the temple were getting cheated. And that would have come to the king's ears, and then he would have said, let me audit your books. But as long as they were doing the work honestly, and there was no need for that, why burden them with extra work to show that they're spending the money honestly? Don't do it. Let them get the work done. Don't have them spend money on an accountant to show that they're spending the money honestly. Just let them spend the money honestly. It's a reasonable way to do things. And in small enough society where everybody can get to know everybody else that's doing something, it would probably be the better way to do things. Our society's gotten so big and so complex that not everybody knows everybody. Your government officials don't know everybody. I mean, even the most accessible of the government officials cannot know everybody in their area. House of Representatives, the original idea is every 10,000 people would have a representative. With roughly 35 million people in the United States, that's 35,000 House of Representatives members. Admittingly, the House of Representatives could essentially know all their constituents and all their concerns, but they couldn't even know all of each other. nothing would get done because there'd be so many people that couldn't even all attend the debates. There'd be no way to know if they got their job done. So our tradition is let's cap it at 235, and then they represent, some of them, a bunch of people, and then there's no way they can know them all. Society was a little smaller then, and let's face it, they're talking about workmen doing work on the temple. It's within eyesight of the palace. It's pretty simple for those who want to know, is the work getting done, to just go to the second floor, the third floor, and look out and see, are there workmen present? Do they have materials? Are they doing the job? Are they sitting around, looking busy? And is, next month has work been done? And yes, okay, the work's been done. If you want to know how it is, send one of your low-level cooks over to talk to a worker, bring him a sack lunch, and let them talk and find out, get to know each other and hear the gossip and bring it back to you. And if you don't hear anything about anybody griping about not getting paid, then hey, the work's done, everybody's happy, everything's honest. And that's kind of how they did it. They also chose to divide the money up according to the law of Moses. There were certain parts of the offering that were specifically to be given to the priest. It was their pay. And so that part got sent to the priest that did the work. So, if you offered a sin offering or a guilt offering, you were supposed to be paid for that. And they kept up with, oh, Frank, you did 7 guilt offerings this week, and you're supposed to be paid, so many shekels each. And so, say it's 3 shekels each. 3 shekels times 7 is 21. Here's 21 shekels. That's your pay for this week. And, that's a reasonable approach. All the other money that came in, all the gifts, all the tax that the law of Moses had imposed on everybody, the population tax, etc., it was given to the workers to repair the temple. So they divided it up according to appropriate use for the money. They did not steal from the priest to repair the temple. They kept their priesthood employed. They're trying to be appropriate and trying to use the money correctly. Verse 17. About this time, Hazael, king of Aram, went up and attacked Gath and captured it. Then he turned to attack Jerusalem. But Joash, king of Judah, took all the sacred objects dedicated by his fathers, Jehoshaphat, Jehoram, and Ahaziah, the kings of Judah, and the gifts he himself had dedicated, and all the gold found in the treasuries of the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and he sent them to Hazael, king of Aram, who then withdrew from Jerusalem. So here it's made to sound like a political problem, and he solved it. If he had solved it by taking all the gold in the palace and sending it, that would have been his prerogative, because that was his money. He's the government, and it's the government's money, and it's a government problem. So taking government money to solve a government problem is appropriate. But he didn't think he had enough. And he may have known something about Hazael that we don't know. But Hazael's flush with cash. He's just captured Gath. He's attacked a formidable foe and won. And he's had to go around Judah to get there. And instead of go back around the long way through the desert, he marches through Judah and decides, I still got an army with me. Let me take Jerusalem while I'm at it. He thinks, I can do this. And Joash decides, giving this guy a gift, a payment, will make him go home. Let's just do that. But he didn't have enough money himself. So what does he do? He goes into the temple and takes all the gold and silver that were supposed to be used to worship God and steals them from the temple and adds it to the tribute he's paying Hazael. That's not what he's supposed to do. It's not his money. He kept an accounting of the ones his grandfather and his father and his uncle and himself had put into the temple, and only used those, his gifts, so to speak. Still not appropriate, because once you give it to God, it's God's. You don't come back, next year, 10 years, 100 years later and say, hey, that gift I give you, I need it back. That's not how that works. But that's what he did. And so he violated the law of Moses there. Now it happened to work. Hazael took all the money, the gold, the silver, and went home. And he didn't come back into Judah. So as far as Joash is concerned, he did it right. He gave enough. In Chronicles, it calls it a sin, and God, from that point on, troubled Joash, and things went downhill from there. He did not trust God. If he had trusted God like Jehoshaphat did, Jehoshaphat, when he faced a similar situation, he went into the temple and bowed down and worshiped God and says, God, this is bigger than me. I can't make the payment. Handle this. Show your God. And Jehoshaphat, with a very small army, defeated this huge army because God fought on their side. And God went through through the camp of the enemy that was invading the land, and more people died that night than Jehoshaphat had to fight with. And they got scared and says, hey, God's fighting for them, and they left town. And so God won the victory. Joash could have done the same thing. It's not like he doesn't know what his grandfather did. It's in the Chronicles. It's in the books. People still remember it. And he could have taken that example and gone into the temple and go, God, you put him on the throne, but now he's attacking us, and we got to have your help. Defend us. I've torn down the temple of Baal. I've removed Baal worship from the land. We're only worshiping you. Now, help us. No, he decides to go to his own ability. And to do that, he has to steal from the temple, steal from the Lord. And so he does so. And he sets up a very bad precedent. And God gives him trouble the rest of his reign from that point on. That's not told here in Kings, that's told in Chronicles, but that's the long-term what happened here. Sure, Hazael withdrew from Jerusalem. It looks like on the short term it was a win. And Hazael does not invade the land again. He's happy. He's got his payment. He's got a bunch of gold. He's got a bunch of silver. He'd looted Gath. He didn't need food. That's what Jerusalem and Judea had in abundance. They didn't have a lot of gold and silver, though. If he had said, hey, give me a tribute of 1,000,000 bushels of wheat, Joash would have been like, oh, that's all you want? 1,000,000 bushels? Oh, sure, that's last spring's harvest. That's easy. No, he wants basically 100 years profit from the country. And Joash gives it to him from sources he didn't have. And he can't replace. And he doesn't replace. Verse 19. As for the other events of the reign of Joash and all he did, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? His officials conspired against him and assassinated him at Beth Millo on the road down to Silla. The officers who murdered him were Jozabad, son of Shemeleth, and Jehozabad, son of Shomer. He died and was buried with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah, his son, succeeded him as king. So after ruling 40 years and getting in trouble with God and not having Jehoiada to give him good wise counsel, and therefore not following God, and that's part of why he stole gold and silver from the temple. He didn't have good counsel, and he's doing things in his own strength and his own ability and his own wisdom. He starts getting in trouble with the people of the land, and they get tired of it, and the officials were like, hey, we got to do something. This isn't working. And two of them decided, what they needed to do was regicide. And so they killed him. And it names the two individuals that did that. Next week, when we deal with Ahaziah, son of Joash, we'll find out what he does about that. And he's appropriate because he goes back to trying to follow Yahweh. But Joash, who had so much promise and did so well at the beginning, by the end of his reign was such that people thought would be better off with the inexperienced guy than the experienced guy. And so he was murdered. He was assassinated. But they buried him in the royal tombs where he should have been buried. They gave him that kind of honor. They were just grateful he wasn't ruling anymore. So Kings doesn't fill out all the details. You have to read Chronicles to understand the full picture, but that's just the way his reign went. Started out strong, started out well, as long as he was young and inexperienced and he paid attention to the priest, he did well. Once he started thinking, I got this and I'm going to do it, and he'd doing it on his own, he got in more and more and more trouble, and eventually people got fed up with it and killed him. But they didn't think it was so bad but what they put his son on the throne. Holy Father, you were working out history then. You're still working out history now. Lord, we don't understand the future completely, but you do. And we trust you that you will bring the future to completion the way you've told us it will. And there's some scary things in the prophecies that you've told us about. But we also trust you to protect us through the trouble, not prevent the trouble. No matter what the circumstances, Lord, we trust you. Have us to obey you. Have us to do your work and will. Have us to understand how to do your work, that we will do it in your power and your authority and the way you say to do it. We won't think we got this and start trying to do your work with our understanding. Have us to acknowledge you in all our ways and do things the way you want us to do them. In your holy name, amen. I am your host, Frank Reich, Associate Pastor of Family and Ministry at Grace Fellowship Baptist Church, and this has been the Wednesday evening Bible study for Wednesday, August 14th, 2024. This is recorded on Saturday, August 10th, 2024, and I hope to see you at church tomorrow. I hope to see you at church Wednesday for the Bible study, and if not, we'll see you here on YouTube. You have a blessed week.